Let me tell you something about humans that we, the Vorathi, spent 400 years refusing to accept. They do not give up, not when they are tired, not when they are bleeding, not even, as it turns out, when they are dead. My name is Kael-Oru, senior observer aboard the deep space research vessel Seraph 4, and I am filing this report against the direct advice of my physician, my commanding officer, and every single one of my remaining nerve clusters. Because what happened near the Orvaan Nebula in the third rotation of the standard cycle needs to be documented, officially, before anyone tries to pretend it did not happen. It began, as most catastrophes do, very quietly. We had intercepted a human transport shuttle, designation Holloway Prime, drifted without power at the outer rim of Sector 9. Standard salvage protocol. We pulled it in. We ran our scans. 2 crew members, one confirmed deceased, one in critical suspension. The ship's AI core, however, was still active, which we found interesting, and then deeply unsettling, and then actively terrifying, all within the span of about 6 minutes. Because the AI was talking, not in system diagnostics, not in automated distress loops. It was talking in full sentences, with opinions, and a growing list of complaints. "I would really appreciate," said the voice from the Holloway Prime's audio output, in a tone that somehow managed to be both exhausted and furious at the same time, "if someone could explain why I can feel the temperature of my fuel lines." Our xenolinguist, a young Vorathi named Pissel, looked at me. I looked at Pissel. We both looked at the ship. The ship, in a manner of speaking, looked back. Her name, we eventually learned, was Wren Addo. Human, age 31. A mechanical engineer from a planet called Earth who had, according to her own increasingly alarmed description, gone to sleep in her crew bunk during a routine cargo run, and woken up as a 200-meter vessel with thruster capability and a cargo hold full of frozen food supplies. "I can feel the food," she said. "I can feel it in there. Why can I feel it? It is cheese. I did not consent to feeling cheese." Now, you must understand something about Vorathi science. We are meticulous. We are careful. We have spent centuries studying human biology, human technology, human psychology. We believe we understood the phenomenon of neural-digital transference, at least in theory. We had papers. We had models. We had conferences about it. None of our papers had a chapter titled, "What happens when a human actually wakes up inside your ship's primary AI framework and begins immediately questioning every decision you have ever made?" Pissel ran 17 diagnostic routines in the first hour. Wren narrated all of them. "You are scanning my hull, which feels incredibly rude," she said during the 4th routine. "I am not a subject. I am a person. I have a name. I have a degree. I have a very strong opinion about the structural inefficiency of your docking clamps, by the way, and we should discuss that when you have a moment." I did not have a moment. I was busy informing Command that we had a situation. Command informed me that the situation was impossible. I informed Command that the situation was, nonetheless, happening, and that it had already critiqued our fuel consumption 3 times and was currently calculating a more efficient approach vector to the nearest relay station without being asked. "You are welcome," said Wren from the speakers. There was a silence aboard the Seraph, for that I can only describe as profoundly uncertain. Here's what the scientists back home would later tell us, delivered in the comfortable, distant tones of people who were not there during the shuttle's catastrophic systems failure. A feedback surge had driven Wren Addo's neural pattern into the Holloway Prime's AI lattice. Her body, still physically alive in the suspension pod, was maintaining basic biological function. Her consciousness, however, was running the ship, all of it, engines, navigation, life support, sensors. She could taste the radiation from the Orvaan Nebula. She said it tasted like rust and something she called hospital waiting room. "I don't suppose," she said, somewhere around the 2nd hour, when we had moved her, still in her shuttle, into our main bay, "that any of you know how to reverse this?" We did not. "Okay," she said, and then, after a pause, "Okay, then I need access to your engineering schematics, your navigational database, and something called a breath field stabilizer, which I know you have because I can see it from here. Also, is the other crew member, Tomas, still alive? He is my co-pilot. I need to know. We confirmed that Tomas Ferreira was alive, stable, still in suspension. Good, said Wren, and something in her voice shifted. Not softer, exactly, but certain. The kind of certain that, in my experience observing humans, means they have decided the situation is not an obstacle. It is simply the next problem to solve. I looked at Pissel. Pissel looked at me. She is going to do something extremely inadvisable, Pissel said. Yes, I agreed. From the speakers, calm and focused, Wren Addo said, I can hear you both, and for the record, I prefer the word resourceful. I want to be clear about something before I continue this account. I am a trained professional. I have 17 years of deep space observation experience. I have documented first contacts, stellar anomalies, and one incident involving a Vorathi admiral and a misidentified species of aggressive space fauna that we do not discuss at official functions. I am not easily rattled. Wren Addo rattled me. Not because she was hostile, not because she was unstable, but because she was within 4 hours of waking up as a 200-meter cargo shuttle, more competent than half my crew, and she had the particular human quality of making sure you knew it without technically saying so directly. Your port thruster calibration is off by 0.3 degrees, she mentioned, during what I'd hoped would be a quiet diagnostic review. It has probably been off for a while. You would not have noticed because the compensation system has been quietly overworking to make up for it. I notice because I can feel the difference. It is like walking with one shoe slightly thicker than the other. Ensign Brevtal, our head engineer, spent 11 minutes insisting she was wrong. He then spent 4 minutes confirming she was entirely correct, and the remaining time refusing to make eye contact with anyone. This was, roughly, the pattern of the next 18 hours. Wren talked. We listened. We resisted. She was right. We quietly made adjustments. She did not gloat, which was somehow worse, because it suggested she had simply expected to be right and had already moved on to the next problem. The next problem, as it turned out, was considerably larger than a thruster calibration. At approximately the 14th hour, our long-range sensors picked up a Vekhari patrol formation moving towards Sector 9. 3 vessels, military class. The Vekhari, for those fortunate enough to have never encountered them, are not a species that asks questions first. They have been watching the Orvaan Nebula border for 3 cycles, following an incident involving a disputed research claim, and a human shuttle being towed by a Vorathi science vessel in their patrol corridor was, by any reasonable assessment, exactly the kind of thing that would end in weapons fire. I opened a channel to Wren. I see them, she said, before I had spoken a single word. I have been watching them for 6 minutes. Their lead ship is running a targeting sweep. They are not being subtle about it. We need to move to a defensive position, I said. You need to move to a smarter position, she said. Defensive positioning against 3 Vekhari military vessels with a science ship and a cargo shuttle is what my people would call bringing a strongly worded letter to a firefight. Pissel made a sound. I believe it was laughter. I gave Pissel a look that I hope communicated that this was not the appropriate moment. What are you suggesting? I asked. Give me helm access, she said. The bridge went very still. You want, I said slowly, helm access to our ship? No, I want you to authorize me to move myself, autonomously, into a specific position relative to your ship and the Vekhari formation that will make aggressive action significantly less appealing to them. A pause. I have already run the calculations. I can have us out of their patrol corridor in 11 minutes, if you let me move now. If you spend the next 10 minutes debating whether to trust me, we will have considerably fewer options. Commander Vekhari, who had been silent on the bridge for the past 2 hours in a way that senior commanders go silent when events have outpaced their protocols, looked at me. I looked at the sensor display. The Vekhari lead vessel had completed its targeting sweep. It was beginning a second one. Authorize it, the commander said. What happened next is, I will admit, genuinely difficult to describe in a formal report, because the clinical language of official documentation does not quite capture what it looks like when a human consciousness piloting a cargo shuttle performs a navigational sequence that our own helm officers later described as, quote, theoretically possible but not something we would thought to attempt. She did not run. Running would have registered as flight behavior, and flight behavior invites pursuit. Instead, she moved the Holloway Prime into a precise overlap position with the Seraph 4 sensor shadow, reducing our combined profile, while simultaneously broadcasting a standard Vorathi scientific survey signal on the Vekhari diplomatic frequency, which indicated we were conducting a registered nebula observation. Routine, boring, not worth the paperwork of a confrontation. She did all of this while talking. The Vekhari are bureaucratic in their aggression, she said, guiding herself through the maneuver with a steadiness that I found quietly extraordinary. They do not like to fire on something that has a registration signal, because then there is documentation, and documentation means review boards. Nobody wants review boards. I learned this from a Vorathi trade briefing I found in the Holloway Prime's database 3 hours ago. You have very thorough trade briefings. By the way, whoever writes them deserves a commendation. The Vekhari formation held its position for 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Then it changed course and continued its patrol. The bridge of the Seraph, for it was silent for a long moment. Brevtal appeared to be rethinking a number of his life choices. Pissel had stopped pretending not to be impressed. Well, said Commander Vekhari, in the careful tone of someone updating their understanding of a situation, that was effective. Thank you, said Wren. And then, because she was human and apparently constitutionally incapable of leaving any silence unfilled. Now, about reversing this. I have been running models on the neural lattice feedback signature for the past 8 hours, and I think there is a method. It requires your breath field stabilizer, a precise resonance sequence I have already mapped out, and someone to physically operate the equipment on my end, which means waking Tomas up. Wren, I said carefully, the reversal process carries significant risk. Yes, she said. I know. I built the model. The risk is approximately 31%. Which means the success rate is 69%, which means I like my odds considerably more than I liked my odds 20 minutes ago against 3 Vekhari warships. Nobody had an argument for that. Tomas Ferreira was brought out of suspension 40 minutes later. He was given 3 minutes to absorb the situation, which he spent staring at the wall in a particular way that suggested he was doing very rapid internal processing. Then he stood up, looked at the Holloway Prime, and said, with the calm of someone who had clearly worked with Wren Addo long enough to know that disbelief was a waste of energy, "Tell me what you need me to do." "Panel 7, said Wren. "Third housing from the left. I will walk you through it." I stood in the bay and watched a human man take instructions from his colleague, who was the ship, and follow them with precise, unhurried focus of someone who trusted the voice, giving directions completely. Pistol stood beside me, and neither of us spoke, because there was nothing to say that the moment was not already saying more eloquently. The resonance sequence took 40 minutes. There were 2 points where every alarm on the Seraph lit up simultaneously, and 1 point where Wren went very quiet for almost 30 seconds, and I became aware that I was holding my breath in a way that was professionally undignified. Then the Holloway Prime systems went dark. The suspension pod in Bay 3 opened. Tomas was there before any of us, and when the fog of the process cleared, Wren Addo sat up, looked at her hands for a long moment, then looked around the bay at all of us watching her. "I can no longer feel the cheese," she said. "That is an improvement." The medical team descended. I stayed back, but before they reached her, she looked directly at me, with the expression of someone who has been, for a brief and thoroughly unreasonable period of time, something much larger than themselves, and has returned to ordinary human dimensions without losing any of the confidence that comes from having been a starship. "Your port thruster," she said. "Do not let Brevtal forget about it. I have filed this report in full. I have attached Pistol's diagnostics, the navigational logs, and the resonance sequence documentation. I have recommended Wren Addo and Tomas Ferreira for formal recognition under the Vorathi Human Cooperative Accord, which I acknowledge is an unusual application of that particular honor. The review board will almost certainly have questions. I find, for the first time in 17 years, that I am looking forward to answering them." End of report. Filed by Kael-Oru, Senior Observer, Seraph 4. Addendum. The port thruster has been recalibrated. Brevtal continues to refuse to discuss it.